Okay, I will call the meeting to order of the Design Review Board today, December 8th, and request that whether we have met the Kansas Open Meeting Act requirements.
I can confirm that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Okay, thank you. And then 1.3 on roll call.
I will call today's roll. Board Member Romey. Board Member Martins.
Here.
Board Member Noonan.
Here.
Board Member Manley.
Present.
Chair Kitchen.
Here.
We have a total of 4 people present at today's meeting. That constitutes a quorum of the Design Review Board. So with the Kansas Open Meeting Act notice being provided and having a quorum, we can move ahead with today's business.
Okay, moving on to 2.1 and approval of the minutes from the November 10th meeting. Are there any comments? Or if not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move we approve the minutes as presented.
I will second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, moving on to new business and 3.1.
Item 3.1 is application CC 22-8, and that's been filed by Maggie Gillum Architect on behalf of the Salina Arts Center. And the request is approval of a certificate of compatibility to allow exterior modifications to be made to the Santa Fe Avenue and the alley facades of the Arts Center building, which is located at 242 South Santa Fe Avenue. And at this time, I would like to introduce Tyler Waldorf with Shockey Consulting, who has been assisting city staff with Design Review Board review and cases, and he actually did the review of the Salina Arts Center project and prepared the report, so he's in the best position to give you a project overview. So I'm going to turn that over to Tyler, who's joining us via Zoom.
Thanks, Dean. Good afternoon, board. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as Dean mentioned, this certificate of compatibility for exterior renovations to both facades of the Salina Art Center was filed by Maggie Gillum of Jones, Gillum, Renz Architects, and the renovations that are being proposed at the property addressed 236 to 242 South Santa Fe include the following. Regarding the Santa Fe Avenue facade, it includes removing the existing metal structure and canopy at the main entry doors and installing a new floating canopy. It also involves removing or modifying the existing storefront and entry doors and installing a new storefront or modifying the existing and moving the entry doors to the north of the building. Also enclosing the alcove in the south bay and removing the door at this location. Installing new extended stone bench and sill with new freestanding art sign along the bench. Installing a new faux sloped roof at the north building that will mimic the tile roof of the south building. And lastly, on this facade, installing new exterior accent lights. As for the alley facade, the improvements proposed include removing existing concrete patio and replacing with a new brick patio, new railing and planters around the patio, and new open metal canopy structures above, which would attach to the existing steel columns. It also includes removing existing metal canopy structure attached to steel columns by entry door and installing new floating canopies above each opening. Removing the existing storefront and aluminum windows and reconfiguring the opening flanks with an existing entry and installing a new folding glass door systems at each. And lastly, on this facade, installing new sign mounted to brick wall above the north window. So that's the list of renovations as proposed. As a reminder, this building, the most recent renovations back in 2015 included the installation of a ceramic tile mural on that south building, Santa Fe Avenue facade by artist Conrad Snyder. That is not being impacted at all by the renovations proposed. In terms of our staff review, the applicant had a design review meeting with staff back in the summer and went over a few of the modifications and requirements at that time. Those recommendations are outlined in your packet. One thing that we have learned as staff since their DRT meeting is that the Salina Art Center is not pursuing serving alcohol from the rear facade, which would have required a conditional use permit for the C4 Central Business District requirements. But one thing just to remind everybody and note is that if the applicant continues with the Santa Fe Avenue facade signage as proposed, the applicant is required to obtain a license of agreement from the City Commission for the encroachment of that sign/bench on the sidewalk and public right-of-way. Overall, staff has found the proposal in character with the building and surrounding downtown district. A few of the things that have been noted in our recommendation, which I believe Ms. Gillum is there today to provide some of this additional information, includes information about that louver system, which is depicted there in that rendering. Confirmation of finish to the exterior new metal canopies, confirmation of details related to the internal illumination and exact design intent of the art component that you see there in that rendering along the Santa Fe Avenue facade, in addition to confirmation of details related to the posters indicated in that new south alcove, and then confirmation of the light fixture specifications and illumination details. Since we're on this elevation here, the two things that we wanted to bring attention to the board today was this proposed faux sloped roof that you see here on the north building, which is a new modification to that facade. And it appears that with the addition of that roof, while it mimics the building to the south, there are a few of the character defining features that currently exist on that north building, that's including the stone cornice, square stone insets, and the stone building nameplate that seem to be impacted with this proposal. And then lastly, while staff is aware this isn't in the purview of the DRB in terms of exiting code requirements, wanted to bring to the attention and get clarification from Ms. Gillum regarding the required travel distances as requested by the fire marshal back at their DRT meeting, just to ensure that exiting is still met, since that south alcove entry exit is proposed to be eliminated. So with that, at the time, staff's recommendation is to postpone consideration, and which is option number 3, until December 22nd of this year, in order for the applicant to provide to staff with additional information as outlined. And as I said, I believe she's there today to do some of that. So Dean, if there's nothing else, I'll turn it back to you at this time.
Okay, so a listing of the items that Tyler identified is on page 15 of your staff reports up there. He's got those itemized 1 through 7, and so this report went out in advance, and so certainly at the time of the report going out and the writing, those were items that were unresolved, but part of the reason for putting those in the report and getting it out is that allows the applicant a chance to respond and clarify those items one by one. And so one option this afternoon would be to focus on those issues, see if they can be resolved at today's meeting, and if so, that would allow you to proceed with moving forward on this item. If there's additional time that is needed to be done to confirm some of those items, then that would bring us back to the postponement option, but this is an advertised public hearing, so we want to have full discussion at today's meeting. So we'll start out by seeing if the board members have any questions of Tyler or other members of staff before we hear from the applicant.
I do have a question on the stone cornice, square stone insets, and the stone building nameplate. And that was only because I went on to Google Earth to kind of look at the north facade, and the nameplate for, says Salina Art Center, 1996 on the nameplate, and wondered if that was a later addition to when the building was built and those other decorative pieces were added at that time, or do we have dates on any of those features?
We don't have dates on all of those. We provided to Tyler, went back to previous reports and actions that were taken. I don't think we have every exhaustive report or previous action on this property, but the original moving in time for when this became the Salina Arts Center was 1996. Obviously, that nameplate dates from that time, not from a previous historic time. And then the other items, the cornice and those things are most likely historical aspects from the uses that were in this building prior to the art center.
Okay, thank
But
you.
I'll ask Tyler if he wants to amplify on that at all.
I don't have any additional information to add to that, Dee. That sounds correct to me.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think, and Maggie may answer this, but was this store in 1996 when the facade was put up, was it a full, the art center was put in there, was it a full face redo? Do we know?
Yes, this is substantially different from the storefront that was there before.
So those cornices probably wouldn't have been there if this is a whole new.
Yeah, one of the challenges that we have is that from 1986 to 2000, the Design Review Board was kind of an independent operating board, operated through SDI, and then in 2000, that is when the Design Review Board came under the purview of the Planning Department, and so we have really good records of everything that's been done since 2000. Our records of what was and what was modified in 1996 is a little less thorough, but if there's discussion on this item, we can run upstairs and check to see if we can provide you with something more specific. But 1996 is the time when the Art Center moved in and when the substantial modifications were made to the facade of the building. The changes that were made after 1996 have been relatively minor compared to the major modification in 96.
Right, because it was a basically warehouse space. So, okay, anything else? Okay, yeah, if we could hear from the applicant, that would be great.
Hello, everyone.
With me here. She's with the Salina Art Center, so we might do a little bit of tag teaming to resolve some of these unanswered items for you guys today. I do have some additional information, some packets for you to kind of peruse while I'm going through all this so that everybody knows what we're looking at and what we're seeing today.
Thank you.
Okay, first I think I'm going to address Katie and Gary's comments about the changes that were made on the facade. So actually, Jones Gilliam did those changes in 1996, so I had all the drawings for those, so I was able to look back and see what had been done. And as Dean had mentioned, it was almost a total facade redo when that project was done. So a lot of what you're seeing is not original to that building. The stone coping on top is original. The 2 inset stones and the name tag were done as part of that 1996 remodel. So, I mean, in our opinion, they are not considered historic. The only person that they would really have much value to would be the Art Center, and they're not looking to keep those for any reason. Part of the reason for doing this entire remodel is so that they can rebuild their presence on Santa Fe and their signage as well. So they no longer need that nameplate or that sign. However, we are open to suggestions of relocating it on the building or possibly relocating it within the building so that people can still see that. There are actually 2 of those nameplates. They're identical. There's one on the front and one on the back. The one on the back will be staying. We don't have any reason to remove or cover that up. So just to give you an idea of when those items were placed on the building. Okay, and I'm going to start, if you don't mind, I'm going to go through these items that the staff has here under their, I guess, conditional items. So I'm actually going to start with item 7 because I think that item 1 is probably the most complicated. So we'll start with the easy and we'll move up. So the confirmation of the light fixtures, specifications, illumination details. So I've actually given you a couple items in your packet. You'll see that there's one sheet for the column accent lights, and there are 4 of those located on what I like to call the columns or the faux columns of the building. They are up-down fixtures. They're very minimal, as you can see. They're about 6 by 6. They're black. They're very modern looking. We think that they'll, at night, I don't know if you have the night, whoever's doing the screen, if you have the night rendering of the whole facade. Dustin, do you have the night rendering?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But again, it's just a way to bring a little bit more interest to the building facade, to identify some key elements like the columns and things like that. The other light fixtures that we have are pretty typical. You've seen them in other locations downtown as well. They're just a typical sign light. We're going to be using actually 6 of those on the front of the building, 3 of which will illuminate the mural at night because that currently has no light on it, so that will be really nice to light that up in the evening and at night. And then the other 3 will illuminate the banners that are in that other alcove. And again, I've got the spec here for you to look at there, and I've circled the head fixture as well as the gooseneck arm so you get an idea of what that'll look like. Those will be a black matte finish. I don't know if anybody has any questions on the lights. Nope. Okay. Then we will move on to item 6, which is the posters in the alcove. And I'm actually going to let Misty chime in on this to tell you what they're planning to do for those.
Okay, well, the banners in the alcove are actually something we currently do. In fact, we do 2 large banners. Those banners indicate what is happening inside the museum as far as what the current exhibition is, along with an advertisement for free admission, because that's an important part of drawing people into our building. But we also will occasionally change them out with information about when enrollment periods start for art classes and those types of things. So they really are just a matter of helping people understand what is happening inside the building. When we close in that alcove, our hope is to be able to display 3 smaller banners that will be a bit more modern and sleek looking, rather than the very large sort of kind of chunky ones that we use now, because that is the space that we have. So it really will be used for exactly the same purpose that we're using it for now, just in a sleeker, more modern way.
Okay. And then she might chime in on this next item as well, but the art sign, there was a question into how that was constructed, what that was going to look like. And I believe, yeah, do you want to share with more details on that?
So the sign itself, the art sign will be a 3-dimensional art piece in itself. It will be a metal fabrication. Spectrum Metalcraft has agreed to fabricate that for us. It will have a translucent front, so it'll be somewhat of a plexiglass, but it'll be something a little more substantial to hold up. That will be painted periodically, whether a period of 2 years or however we determine it needs to be repainted. But it will be repainted by a commissioned artist. So in itself, it becomes a bit of a destination piece for people to get their photo taken with so-and-so artist's work at Salina Art Center outside. So it also creates a fresh look every year or 2 years, depending on how we see the paint is holding up. But will also be a way to engage our local artist community in becoming part of actually being commissioned to paint that sign for us.
Will it be lit at all, or?
The goal is that it would be internally lit, just with so it would create kind of a soft glow. It would never be bright. There is discussion, however, about not lighting it simply because so rarely are we open at night that it might not make a lot of sense. So it may end up just being a solid metal sign.
Will it be anchored at all, or is
It will be anchored to the bench there, so that, yeah, so it's, yeah, will be very substantial.
Any other questions?
I encourage you to light it up.
Encourage us to light it. I like
That's
the
just me.
idea of it glowing.
Yeah, that's just me.
But, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And again, Dustin, I don't know if you have the night rendering, you can show them with how that would be lit from internally at night. And I agree with Gary, I think it should be lit at night. We have so many other great lights in downtown. I think it would be a great addition to that. So item number 4 then is the confirmation of the finish on those metal canopies. Currently, the storefront on the building is a black or a very deep bronze in color. So the goal is to match those on both the front and the back of the building. So if you guys want to look at, I just brought a little paint sample for you to look at. It's black. So again, they'll be painted basically a black tone very similar to that, or something that matches the storefront so that they appear like they're one piece. There's several parts of that canopy, both on the back and the front of the building, that are integrated with the storefront. So of course the goal is to make it feel like it's all one big system. Item number 3, that is the code footprint that we've been asked to kind of identify and explain how we're still meeting egress, life safety, all that stuff that we're required to meet, since we are removing one of the 4 doors, one of the 4 egress doors. So you can look, I supplied you with it says CFP at the bottom of the page. It's the code footprint that we will also be giving the city when we do our permit review for construction. And I know it's you're probably looking at it going, what's going on here? But I'll try to explain a little bit in a nutshell here. We have 3 exits out of the building. This is classified as an A occupancy, and A3, which would be pretty typical of an art gallery or something similar. 3 exits, normally for any occupancy, particularly A, that has over 50 occupants, you're required to have at least 2 exits. So we do have 3 exits. We have a total occupant load of 251 occupants according to the code, and they're shown throughout the plan there. You can see those little numbers. Those are identifying where those occupants are coming from. The heavy dashed lines are indicating the path of travel for those occupants. So, and we also try to identify in the plan what that max travel is for the occupants. If you look on the far right side of the building there, the dashed line that's coming from the very south gallery, with the 21 occupants, it says that max travel is 125 feet. So that is if little Timmy were in Gallery 3 and he were in the very far corner of Gallery 3. That is where that distance is taken from. And it's how far he has to go to get to the nearest exit, which would be that north door there. So as I said, that's 125 feet maximum travel distance in the building. For an A3 type occupancy, we are allowed to have up to 200. So we are meeting our max travel distance, we're meeting our door requirement, we're meeting our door width requirement. Little arrows next to the doors there. You can see I've got the width of the door noted, and then the occupant load that is exiting through the door and how much that door would allow to exit. So we're meeting all of those as well. That was your Code Footprint 101 course for the day. Any questions? Okay. Then we will move on to the item 2, which is the louver system. I've also given you a detail sheet. It is a 4.3, where I show a section right through that louver, right through that new storefront, and the faux roof there with the bench and everything. The first drawing there on the far right is the demolition plan. You can see everything that's hatched is being removed, or everything that's dashed is being removed, hatched is existing. And then next to it is the new plan, where we're going in with the new storefront and the new louver system. This is we're not sure if this is going to be electronic or a manual system yet, but essentially it will be constructed of 6-inch pieces of wood that are about 3/8 inch thick, so not much different than this piece of flooring I brought with me. But they're very thin, and Misty can talk more on this, but the intent is for them to help filter light as needed. They do a lot of events during the day that require having a projector or having a screen, and if you've ever been in there during the times where they're trying to do those, it's very difficult to see. So this is a way to try to reduce or eliminate the light for certain times during the day, but still allow those to be open for the most part so that you can view in. I think the renderings do a really excellent job of showing you that when those are open, it's still very transparent. You can definitely see what's happening inside. There's lots of light still coming through. I guess I'll let Misty talk a little more about how those are useful for her in the Art Center.
Okay, well, again, we currently have a motorized blind system in those windows that were installed during the 96 remodel, and they are a traditional metal blind, so to speak, that are wearing out. They are bent, they are broken. Our goal is never to block the view because it is our greatest marketing tool. So the use of these blinds currently and in the future is to control ambient light during any public presentation that includes projection, where we need to dim the space, or if for any reason there would be any sort of art on the wall that did require us to protect it from that direct ambient light. Because of our own internal security procedures and our accreditation standards, the blinds are never closed at night simply because we need people to be able to see through that space. It's how you identify if there's someone in the building that shouldn't be. So anyway, again, it's a solution to a problem that we have, but it's also just upgrading an existing solution that we have. I think, any questions about that? I would say our blinds are closed currently maybe 2% of the year. It's very rare.
I didn't even realize I didn't know you had any.
Okay, so now on to the more complicated issue of the faux sloped roof. And again, I talked a little bit about the stone building nameplate. In our opinion, that doesn't have a whole lot of historic value. What's more important to us, and again, one of the reasons we are doing this big facelift for the Art Center is they need a building that's cohesive. They need a building that says this is the Art Center, which currently you're seeing two separate buildings that are kind of unidentifiable. So, we looked at several ways to try to marry the two buildings, make them feel like they're one building or one space, one art gallery. And one of the solutions we came up with was to mimic the Spanish-style roof from the south building to the north side of the building, which it will entail either covering or removing the nameplate and the two stone coins that are in the building. Again, the nameplate can be relocated if that's something that you guys feel is really important to the building. I did put it on the elevation that I included. I put it on the right side there, on the north side of the building near the entry, just as a suggestion of where that could be located on the front of the building if we needed to do so. Again, we don't feel like that is really a character defining feature of this building or that it has much historic value. But I understand that the stone coping on top is original to the building. That's very typical of construction back then. It's no different than seeing like a metal flashing or a metal coping on a building today. That's how construction was done, and so it is original to the building. I'm still not convinced that it has a lot of historic value, but I do understand, making an extra effort to not destroy that or remove that. So, again, if you want to go back to your section, your building section that shows the demo and the new construction, we do show that what we plan to do there, and what we're showing is that the stone coping will remain and will not be impacted by the construction. We will actually build the roof out over that. So there shouldn't be any need to remove it, chip away at it, anything like that. It should remain totally intact. So, if 20 years down the road, the Art Center says, well, we want to sell the building, we just don't fit here anymore, whatever it is, then maybe someone comes in and says, I'd like to take this off, I don't like it. Well, so if they were to remove it, then there would not be any significant damage done to that coping, to the parapet, or the brick in general, and it would appear almost as it does today, minus the nameplate and the stone coins. So, and that's a pretty typical solution. I work a lot on historic buildings, so this is not an uncommon item that comes up. And a lot of what they do suggest in those situations is that we do everything we possibly can to retain the historic value of an architectural feature, even if we cover it up. So that is the plan. And I'll actually let Misty talk a little bit too about, how adding that faux roof is going to kind of affect how the Art Center is viewed from Santa Fe. And yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if you can go back to the image of what the building looks like now. It really does, particularly to a visitor who is not from Salina, appear to be two separate facilities. So if you are looking for the art museum, you may go to the alcove door. You can't get in there. It tells you to go to another door. But as you go to the north, you look into this completely different building that is empty, because we don't put art in that side of the building because of the ambient light. We have tried a variety of solutions over the years to, hang banners, to do things to draw attention, to let people know that you have to walk in the building and then you have to go to the south to get into the whole other building. So removing any perception or illusion that these are two separate buildings would really behoove our audience, help us communicate that with the audience. The audience would recognize that in this one facility there is one entry door that they would go into. They'll be greeted by a welcome desk with a new remodel. But the idea of having to go in and around makes much more sense than if I'm just trying to figure out how to get into that south building. We have had people stand out there, they will come to the window, they will peek in, they will go back to that north door, they'll go around through the alley, they'll try to find the back door. Usually we're literally catching them on the street saying, no, come to this door and come in and then go around. So it is necessary. It's a challenge that we have been dealing with the entire 5 years that I have been at the Art Center, as far as helping people from the street, people who are not familiar with Salina Art Center, people who may not have the in, understand who we are, what you do when you go to that facility, how you get into the facility, and just some of those basic challenges. So it is really, we believe, a critical necessity that these two buildings come together as one cohesive space.
Questions? Thank you.
I'm going to ask Dustin to stay on this slide here, and for also for the board's benefit and maybe for the applicant's benefit, I'm going to walk the commission through the timeline and why these buildings appear differently as they are. So in reconstructing the timeline, this building if you are old like me, you remember that being the home of Knight's Sporting Goods. And it had a traditional storefront, retail storefront. And in 1987, Knight's Sporting Goods closed, and the property was purchased by the Salina Arts Center, this building, and that was done in 1987, and that space was open to the public in 1988. And as part of that project, local architect Don Mars took out the traditional retail storefront and put in those two arched stone surrounds and a terracotta column here. And so this building was built in 1929, and it was designed as a Mission Revival cornice with a Spanish tile roof. So that was the original design from 1929. The building to the north was built in 1946, and that's basically a commercial vernacular style. There's no, it's not any kind of named architectural style, but they were built at different times and had different occupancies. So in 1992, the Art Center purchased this building, and they worked with Jones Gillum Renz to create an open floor plan for a gallery. So this became the gallery wing for the Art Center, had gallery and workspace, restrooms, and storage. And this glassed storefront, the arch storefront, was designed by Jones Gillum Renz as a separate time at a separate building. And that, although it was purchased in 1992, it didn't have its full public use and dedication until 1996, which is why the date on the nameplate. So this was acquired first, and this was separate and freestanding. This was acquired as an expansion. This was designed by DMA Architects. This was designed by Jones Gillum Renz, and this was done in the early to mid 90s. This was done in 1987. So you had two different buildings that were built at two different times. The original buildings were designed by different architects and built at different time periods. They're not the same Mission Revival architecture on the north that you have on the south. So they're trying to blend two separate buildings that were separate in use, separate in time of construction, and separate design. And their design they're presenting today is trying to meld those two buildings together. But that is the timeline. And so the building to the south was purchased and occupied first, and then the gallery space was acquired later and occupied fully in 1996. And there have been no major modifications since those two projects.
So based on that, I mean, what I feel like I'm hearing is that really the stone cornice is probably the only piece that was historic, you know, for 1946 or whatever that you said, and that this solution that the applicant is presenting to provide a structure that does not or does little harm to that historic piece would meet. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we're preserving the building, even though I look at it as no different as putting an awning over a building.
And that's what I was going to bring up, and Maggie may be able to speak to that, but there's some property directly to the south of this as a similar Mission style revival design, has the terracotta tile, and there was, I think it's this building down here, and there was a proposal to put awnings on the front of that. The awnings essentially covered the historical cornices but did not remove or damage them. And so the board approved that because essentially it was reversible without irrevocably losing that historical detail. So essentially, although this is a sloped roof, what the applicant is stating is basically that you can lay that over the existing cornice without damaging it. You're covering it, but you're not removing it. You're not removing a potentially character-defining feature. You're covering it, and so it's not being lost.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a handful of questions, and let me start, right? I love the design. It looks really, really good. I'll go down through my list. So the lighting fixture specifications that staff wanted to learn more about, those lighting fixtures, they're not, do we require that? Is that, because some buildings downtown don't have any lighting. Is that just for
The
the building
lighting's not
aspects?
required. We just encourage that the lighting be either downcast to the sidewalk or upcast so it illuminates the upper part of the building. But we're just trying to prevent light spill from spilling out horizontally into the street. But if it's downcast or upcast lighting, that's what the guidelines encourage.
So from what was presented today, would that be satisfy staff's concerns?
I'll address that to Tyler since he reviewed this more thoroughly than we did. Does that clarify your question about that, Tyler?
Yes, it does. Very much so.
Okay.
All right, to number one, I do like the idea of not removing them. That makes life simpler. Relocating the stone building nameplate. I did notice it was from 1996. I was starting to question whether that was really historic, but heck, that's 30 years now, almost 30 years now. So I liked, that was my idea, was to relocate it, consider relocating it. I liked the rendering of relocating that, but that's just one person.
And yeah, and if that's a condition that the board has, and we're more than happy to do that. I don't think that the Art Center is opposed to that in any way.
Yeah, we can vote on that later. The art component, again, I really liked the sign. When I was reading through the code, I noticed two areas where it says the sign shall not dominate the appearance of the building. I mean, it's an art piece, and so yeah, it's going to be a little bit bigger than other signs per se, and then also it's pretty loud. Again, you're an art center. It's an art piece. It looks good. So I'm trying to, convince myself in my own logic of saying, is this an art piece or is it a sign? So I kind of label it as an art piece and go for it. And then the other side of me says, if we allow this, what else is going to come next? If a business next door that has nothing to do with related to art, and they want to put a loud sign like that up, well, what leg do we have to stand on to say no? So, did I ask a question?
Yeah, if you could answer that, we've got a job for you because you could spend a full day, and planning staff does, going back and forth debating what is a mural, what is a sign, what is art, what is a sign, is that art or is it a sign? So our simplistic minds, and I believe Maggie was involved in that one too, but we determined that the Salina 67401 painting on the north wall of the then Ad Astra bookstore was a sign because it had letters and numerals and you could read it. And so some people think that's art, and that's fine. We, for regulatory purposes, treated it as a sign. For us, it's not that important about whether it's a sign or a piece of art. It is a structure. It is located in the public right-of-way. You're looking at the design and location aspects of it. The actual approval to erect it will ultimately come from the city commission because it does occupy the city right-of-way.
And I did want to comment on that. We have had a survey done of the property, and as you can see on the code footprint, the facade of that north building is actually pulled back a little ways from the building to the south and the north, and we've determined from our survey that was done that we actually sit about 14 inches back from the property line, and then the storefront itself sits back pocketed within the building, the construction of the exterior wall. So we actually believe that we will be able to move that bench inward to where we are no longer located in the right-of-way. So we more than likely, after learning that, probably will not need a conditional or a license agreement with the city. We believe that we can keep that bench within their property line. And for the sign.
It's this body that would be approving or disapproving. So.
And to the sign versus art aspect, I mean, I think that's a lot of what this board, you know, is here to do, is to determine what, you know, what that is and what it means for each business. You know, if First Bank across the street were to put First Bank, you know, in front of their bank, maybe that's a little different because it is a business and a bank versus the art center across the street. We really look at it as being art. It's changeable. You can interact with it. We hope that it kind of becomes a piece that people know and frequent and like take pictures by, so that's kind of something like this, like Dean said, the 67401 sign. We kind of want that to be a very similar experience for people in downtown, something that downtown becomes a kind of known as. It just so happens that it also serves as signage. So, but again, we view it a little more as art, but it's up to you guys what it's viewed as. And of course, I've got on the elevation, I've outlined, you know, what I've included that as part of the signage and the square footage calculation there. So we're still, I mean, even with that as a sign aspect, we're still well within that allowed square footage for signage on the entire building.
That's what I was going to mention, and you can tell just looking at
Yeah,
it visually as
I
far
mean,
as size-wise.
the facade is very long and linear. So in reality, it's. I mean, just looking at that rendering, it actually does not appear that large when you look at the overall picture. But they will be. I think the T is the tallest letter, and it stands at about 4 feet tall, I think.
We don't have any concerns about the size or location because it is proportional to the facade, and it's, we have 100 feet of frontage on Santa Fe, so we have ample amount of sign allocation that this property can have, and it's not close to using it all.
So a few other, I said I had a list of questions. So related to the louvered system, you provided information on that, the metal, the finish of the metal canopies, as well as the details on the posters. You know, we rely on staff input just as much as our own board's input. Did those satisfy staff's questions, or did you have enough time to review? Or?
Well, again, I'll defer to Tyler on that since this is his list of items.
Yeah, no, greatly appreciated the additional information. And I think, you know, the biggest concern as it relates to the design guidelines is in regard to transparency. And so I think the explanation and additional information about the use and detailing satisfies that requirement.
That is all.
For me, I was just going to state that probably removing that door, it seems like that you are within code on everything. That's probably your only answer after you said for 5 years to stop having people go to that door and being confused where to go. So to me, that I would think that's going to completely eliminate that. And there's pretty clear now where you're going to enter that building. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, that door actually currently opens up into a gallery, and they have it blinds and things that cover that door because of the light that comes into the space. So it actually will benefit the gallery part as well, because they'll be able to eliminate that source of light in there.
Has this already been confirmed by the fire marshal, or is that yet to happen?
I mean, they'll review. I have talked to them about this project, and I don't know if they've. I believe I have sent them this latest plan, but again, that's something that they will review when we do the building permit, and if it doesn't meet, I mean, it doesn't meet, but all the calculations I've done, we're still well within our means to have those 3 doors there.
I think the important thing is just confirming that even with adjustments, that it is possible to eliminate the door and still meet the fire code. We didn't want to be in a position where we led you down a path to eliminate a door and then come back later and have to report that we couldn't eliminate it because of a life safety issue. So I'm confident that even if there has to be some adjustments made, that we have the proper amount of exiting for this facility.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Do we have anyone from the public?
We do not have anyone online, or it appears in the room from the public.
Okay. So, that being said, does anyone have any other comments or like to make a motion on 3.1?
Yes, I'll move that we approve the application, and with the encouragement that they relocate the nameplate on the front, and then if there's any significant changes or deviations to the plan as presented, it returns to the Design Review Board for further consideration.
Okay,
I'll second that.
okay. Is there any other discussion, or was that sufficient for staff and what you need?
Yes, that's a good motion that we can work with, and we can turn that into an approval letter and work with the Art Center on their next steps.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Thank you.
Thank you for everybody's patience as we walk through those questions, but it's a pretty complicated project. So.
Okay, moving on to 3.2.
Speaking of complicated projects, now we're gonna talk about the plan to do phases 2 and 3 of the Lee Lofts apartment renovation project, and they're coming to you as separate applications, so there'll be some overlap in our report, but I do believe something that's extremely helpful is that the architect provided a summary page to go with the application that kind of summarizes those things that are significant about relating to building number 2. And so just for everyone's background, there was some design review work done in 2018 when phase 1 was done, and the focus was on some minor demolition that occurred in that courtyard area that's between the north building, phase 1, and the south building right here, which is the subject of our application. Part of the challenge that we've had as a staff and as the owners have had as property owners is just defining the boundaries of what constitutes phase 2 and what constitutes phase 3. But the renovation of the north building was completed in 2020, and there's 53 units in that north building, and those units are occupied. And so now Overland Property Group, which is the overall owner developer of this project, is proposing to convert what we're referring to as the hardware building, which is building 2, or the south twin to the north building, and then what we're referring to as the warehouse addition south of that into loft apartments. And the renovation of that, what is referred to as the hardware building, would occur first, and the applicants are proposing to create 50 apartment units on floors 2 through 5 of that building. And so this is the hardware building. This is the hardware warehouse addition. This was built in 1904, 05. This was built in 1928 as an addition to this. So they're essentially 2 different buildings built at 2 different times. That's why we're referring to them separately. And so the plan is for this building on floors 2 through 5 to create 50 apartment units with a commercial space on the first floor. Most of the apartments would be 1-bedroom units, but there would be a handful of 2- and 3-bedroom units. So in terms of the elements that we're looking at with this application is we have some exterior modifications to the building, including tuck pointing and brick and mortar repair and replacement, removal of the existing metal fire escapes, and removing the existing glass block and brick infill on the first floor facade, and replacement with a new storefront consisting of aluminum windows. So the plan is to remove this glass block storefront on the first floor and replace it with a traditional storefront with aluminum windows. The second element of this requires an aerial view, but tucked behind this building is an addition that was constructed, we believe, in 1959, and it's a 2-story addition. And so the request is to remove that non-historic addition behind the building and to create a new courtyard space that would provide amenities to residents. And then the third element is review of a plan to convert the vacant lot across the street south of the outdoor area for the VU and to turn that into a new surface parking lot for residents of the apartments. So those are the 3 aspects that you're looking at. So we're going to talk about the exterior facade modifications, the demolition of the 2-story addition, and the construction of the proposed off-street surface parking lot. So those are the 3 items that require your review and approval. So the plan for the parking lot across the street would involve taking that, paving it, installing 12 parking stalls. They would be 90-degree stalls, would be face south. They would be dimensioned at 9 feet wide and 19 feet in depth. They'd all have wheel stops, and there would be alley access at the rear of the lot. So I don't think you're going to have any luck scrolling through those, Dustin, because those are on a separate drawing in the packet. And as part of that, the architect's proposing a rock planting beds along the north edge adjacent to the VU, and also out along the Santa Fe frontage. And so this project, there are 50 off-street spaces that are located in a lot off of North 5th Street. There are 8 additional parking spaces, including 2 handicapped accessible spaces that are located to the north of the north building along Elm Street. And there's handicap ramps and stairs that access the Phase 1 warehouse building from the north and from the central courtyard between the 2 warehouse structures. So one of the things about this is that while it's in the downtown area, most of the time this board does not discuss parking because, as a general rule, no off-street parking is required in the C4 district. There's an exception for that for residential apartments or buildings that are primarily used as residential apartments. And in the central business district, parking has to be required at 1/2 the rate of what you would see for, say, apartments like Reserves at Prairie Glen on South Ohio or places like that. So in the downtown, you only have to provide half as much parking as you would in a suburban location. But nonetheless, the ultimate build-out, they would have 135 units, and that would require 106 parking spaces to serve all 3 phases. With the plan to build surface parking across the street, that would result in a total of 70 parking spaces, and the owners and developers have applied for an off-street parking variance. And so that will be dealt with by another board, but we just wanted to share with you that in this case, it's a downtown use that is required to provide some of its own parking. In this case, they're able to physically provide 70 spaces for their residents. We've determined that the code would require 106, and they have requested or have filed an application to reduce that requirement to 70, and that will be considered separately by the Salina Board of Zoning Appeals. As far as our review of the parking lot across the street, we have found that the design conforms with all of the city's design standards for parking lot facilities. So as to the dimensions, the buffers, all of those things comply with the design guidelines. As far as the two-story addition, our research shows that it was built in 1959. It's a concrete and masonry structure that, according to our records, is 32 feet wide and 43.5 feet deep, and it's 35 feet tall. The plans indicate it was built for sheet metal storage. The applicant is proposing to remove this and replace it with an outdoor courtyard. This is a historic building, and the State Historic Preservation Office has determined that this addition is non-historic. So we don't see this as negatively impacting the rest of the project. Excuse me. So this building complex is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's our understanding that the owners are applying for historic tax credits. That means that the, in and of itself, that the plans submitted for renovation of this building will have to preserve and protect the character-defining features of the building, and this addition is not considered to be a character-defining feature. So we've provided you with the guidelines as it relates to building rehabilitation, which this is, guidelines relating to storefronts, which this involves a change to the first floor storefront, guidelines for streetscapes, and then guidelines for demolition. And it states that demolition should only be considered if a building does not contribute to the historical or architectural character of the district. This addition that's at the rear there certainly does not. So it's not a historical building. Its removal and its proposed reuse should result in a more positive and appropriate visual effect to the building site and downtown district. So on page 11, we have outlined on page 11 8 findings which we believe could be incorporated to support approval of the project components. And so those findings deal with those 3 items relating to the exterior renovation and the storefront change, the demolition, and the proposed parking lot. And so your options would be to approve the application for the exterior facade modifications, the proposed parking lot, and demolition of the 1959 two-story addition based upon staff suggested findings. You could approve the certificate of compatibility for those items subject to any additional conditions identified and approved by a majority of the board. You could postpone consideration if you don't think you have enough information, or you could deny the application as presented. Our recommendation would be to approve the proposed exterior improvements and that the approval be made subject to the 2 conditions we've outlined on page 12 of the report. And that would require that final planting plans for the buffers for the parking lot be submitted and reviewed and approved by staff prior to beginning construction of that lot. And if there are any significant changes to the project as approved, we would be notified to determine whether additional review by staff or this board would be required. So again, this is focusing on phase 2, building 2, and the 3 elements you're being asked to look at is the storefront modification on the first floor, the removal of the non-historic addition at the back, and the plan for building a surface parking lot across the street on the west side of Santa Fe. So with that, I'd be open to any questions that you might have about those 3 elements.
Did we have any artist renderings of the storefront change? The proposed photos?
Photos of the original store.
Original, but I mean of the proposed changes? Oh.
Yeah, you have elevations in your packet.
Okay. I guess
I didn't see.
Those are in those architectural.
well, I got the side. Did you see them?
No. I don't believe.
I didn't think I saw them. But that doesn't mean, if I didn't see them, doesn't mean anything. But
So it doesn't appear like you have them in your packet, but I know Dustin has the packet, the design drawings, if he
okay, well,
wants to
here's,
pull those
I
up.
guess this is,
Yeah, no,
But those are-
that's
that's not
already
in
on
on there, yeah.
on building
It's,
1.
it would be
This isn't,
sheet
that's not.
A point, or A 3.1.
I do have a question, since Maggie's up on, since it's going to be commercial on the first floor, on this building 2 is what, on this one, will there be another entrance added, or will that be the entrance on 3 be for both?
So
2 and 3?
there's actually multiple entrances into this first commercial, the first floor of this building. Several are off that courtyard.
Okay.
And the courtyard does have that ADA ramp access from both the east and the west.
Okay.
And then there is still a door opening between 2 and 3 on the first floor. So depending on what tenant goes in there, that may remain open for use, so that you could go up through the
Off
door
Santa
in
Fe.
3 and into
Yeah.
2, yes.
Okay. Okay.
And then you can see there, that's the proposed storefront, and that is identical to what was existing before they filled it in with the glass block and the brick. So our plan is to just go back in with what resembles the original storefront.
okay, I see. Okay, thank you.
Maggie, is there anything materially different from phase 1 to phase 2?
From phase 1 to phase 2.
Like from a design or
I mean, visually type?
proposal?
No, they're almost identical buildings, so the plan is to treat them the same. There's not many exterior renovations that are being done other than replacing the windows that are in need of repair and replacement. They'll be similar to the ones that are in Building 1. The windows on the floors 2 through 5 here that you're seeing on the front facade, those are actually newer aluminum windows that are in better condition. So we plan to keep those, but replace the glazing, because right now it's very thin, not very energy efficient. So we're going to place that with thicker insulated glass. But other than that, it's not going to look a whole lot different than what you're seeing today. It will just look cleaner and a little bit more repaired and nicer windows.
So this is just for my curiosity, not to do with the application. Building 1, had a certain amount of market rate versus low income. Is this going to be all market rate? Do you know?
And actually, I have Austin Cack, who is on the Zoom with us, and he's with Overland Property Group. It is a affordable housing development in
Okay.
Building 2, but he might be able to answer as far as what percentage of that is affordable and which
That's
percentage
just as
is
a
market.
community member wondering.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So this development, all 50 units would be affordable. So this does not have any market rate units included in it.
Okay. Will that be the same for building 3 as well?
Building 3 is planned to be the exact opposite. So those will be, I think there's 32 units planned on that in that building, and those will all be market rate units.
Okay, thank you.
And this may be something that pertains not to our board at all, but what would happen if they didn't get the appeal for the fact that they wouldn't have enough parking?
Then, as before, we could issue a building permit for the 50 plus 32, the 18 or 82 additional units. They would have to demonstrate that they had acquired additional parking within 600 feet of their building for their tenants.
Other questions? Okay, do we have anyone from the public?
We do not have anyone from the public on Zoom or in the room currently, unless Mr. Mikesell has something to share.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Free.
Okay. I would entertain a motion on 3.2.
I will motion option number two, approve the certificate of compatibility for the exterior facade modifications proposed parking lot and 1959 two-story addition based upon staff's suggested findings in the packet, subject to any additional conditions identified, which are the final planting plans for the parking lot landscape buffer along Santa Fe, and the buffer strip along North Street of the parking lot must be submitted and reviewed to and approved by staff prior to beginning construction of the parking lot. If there's any significant changes, we may come back to this board.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. 3.3.
Item 3.3 refers to what is referred to as Phase 3 in Building 3, even though it is attached to the existing building. It is a different phase in terms of timing from what will be done with Building 2, and as the representative for Overland Property Group indicated, it will be fully market rate apartments as opposed to income limited apartments. So in this phase, the proposal is to create 32 apartment units. They will occupy floors 1 through 5. There will be a small commercial space on the first floor. These will be a mixture of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom apartments in this building. And so the modifications are much more minor. In this case, we're talking about tuck pointing and brick and mortar repair. We're talking about removal of the metal fire escapes. The existing stairs into the building will be repaired, and we're also talking about restoring the window frames, but installing new insulated glass in all the windows. And so in this case, we're primarily talking about a building rehabilitation and some work on the windows. Again, our analysis is that this complex is on the National Register of Historic Places. It's our understanding that the applicants are seeking historic tax credits. The plans that we have reviewed that have been prepared by the project architect appear to preserve and protect the character-defining features of this historic building. And so we think the findings can be made to support the facade modifications, which are relatively minor in nature, as meeting our downtown design guidelines. And our recommendation would be to approve a certificate of compatibility with the condition that if there's any significant changes to the proposed renovations as approved by the board, that we will be notified as a staff to determine whether any additional review is required. But this is, whereas the previous project had 3 different elements that were somewhat significant, this is minor modifications, removal of the firescapes and replacement and repair of the original steps in front, I believe, are the only things that even could be considered noticeable changes. So.
Okay, Dustin, could we see the west elevation, just since that wasn't in the packet, and I'm just curious?
Wasn't that the west elm?
No, it was the south.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? No?
I don't think so.
Would anyone like to hear from the applicant?
Sure, if they've got anything to add. If they have something they'd like to
Oh,
add.
you guys are just amusing me now. So, yeah, I mean, there's, like Dean said, there's just not, again, it's not going to look much different than it does today, just in better shape, a little cleaner, windows that aren't broken or missing. Like you said, all the windows are original steel, so we intend to keep those. They're in pretty good shape, and they're operable. They're actually very cool. We're just going to replace the glass. It's damaged or broken, missing, and of course it's very thin, 1/8-inch thick glass, so we need to replace that with something that's going to be a little bit more energy efficient. But other than that, it will look relatively the same.
Okay.
Are the steps going to be modified in any way or just repaired as is?
They're not going to be modified, no. The only damage really is at the bottom stair where it's fallen off and then there's a chunk missing there. But the top landing actually has a tile mosaic on it, so we would like to keep those stairs intact, so we just plan to replace that bottom stair.
Any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dustin, do you have one?
I had one clarification, you can sit down. One clarification for staff on the parking variance. Us approving this without any asterisks of parking is just fine. They'll supersede.
Yeah, your role is, we have design guidelines for surface parking lots downtown, and your role is to look at their design for the parking lot and whether it meets our design guidelines and whether the project has enough parking to meet the public need is a decision for the Board of Zoning Appeals, and so you're not making any judgments about the adequacy of parking, just the design of what they're proposing. So.
Okay. And Dustin, once again, anyone from the public, or is there anyone that would like to share anything?
We do not have anyone from the public online currently.
Okay. I would take a motion on 3.3.
I will make a motion to go with option 2, that if there is any significant changes, that they come back through the board.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 3.4.
Item 3.4 deals with a proposed projecting sign at the relocated Ad Astra bookstore and does not involve Ms. Gillum as an applicant. So, this report was, and the project was reviewed by Tyler Waldorf, and so we're going to turn that over to him. But again, this is a building where exterior facade renovations were approved by this board previously, and the question before the board today is the location, size, and design of a proposed sign. So I'll turn it over to Tyler.
Thank you, Dean, and my apologies. I have a visitor with me at the moment. I'm on full-time uncle duty, and it's meltdown time. So, as Dean mentioned, this is application CC 2211, filed by Gleason and Sons on behalf of Ad Astra Books and Coffee House, requesting a certificate of compatibility to allow the installation of a new exterior sign on the building located at 135 North Santa Fe Avenue. The existing building was constructed in 1929 after the previous Bulkley business block was destroyed by fire in 1928. Since that time, it's had a number of tenants and retail shops on both stories. In 2016 or 17, excuse me, JGR Architects actually submitted an initial certificate of compatibility on behalf of the owner at that time, which was the Michael Walker Trust. Since then, the drawings were revised and modifications changed on behalf of the current owner, Blue Beacon. And as Dean mentioned, that was brought to you all September of last year to approve those renovations. So at hand this evening is the proposed signage design, which includes a new 42-inch round sign with internal illumination and printed graphics, routed faces, and letters. And according to the renderings and images received by the applicant, the proposed sign is to be installed on the underside of the existing balcony above the entry, which you can see there. We have provided you all with the downtown design guidelines related to signage. In terms of our analysis, the C4 district allows up to 3 square feet of sign per lineal feet. The building itself has just over 26 feet, and so the signage, which has approximately 9.6 square feet in area, is well below the allowed signage. One thing to note is that the guidelines do allow illuminated signs, but have a preference against those that are fully illuminated. So that is something that the staff is requesting additional information on from the applicant. And as you can see there, we didn't have the attachment details at the time, so staff was also requesting additional information on how the sign would be attached to the underside of the balcony. On page 6 of the application materials, you'll see 6 of the guidelines which staff has found to provide your support of approval of this application. And in terms of your options tonight, we are recommending option number 2 for approval with the following condition, and that would be if there are any significant changes to the design or materials approved by the Design Review Board, these will be presented to the board's administrative staff to determine whether additional review is required. So at this time, Dean, I can turn it back to you. I'm not sure if we have a representative in the room.
Okay, I think the 2 things that we would want to clarify before taking action. So the one would be, as Tyler mentioned, almost all of our signs downtown have some method of nighttime illumination, but what the guidelines discourage is having sign cabinets that are fully illuminated. And so the preference is for backlit signs or having signs where the letters are illuminated. And so that is what we would want to clarify, the exact method of illumination. And then the other thing is just the method. It wasn't clear from the drawings how this would physically attach to the balcony that it would be suspended from. So if we could get those items clarified before taking any action, I think that would be helpful to fully comprehend what we're approving.
Okay. Are there any questions from staff before we hear from the applicant?
I think my question will be for him.
Okay, if you'd like to come forward, thank you.
I am the designer on this sign, and one of the questions was about illumination, and I'll go ahead. I don't know if you've got this in your packet or not, but I'll give you a copy of it.
Thank you.
So the area that's in white on that drawing to the left, that Dustin has up here, this is going to be kind of a fun sign. This is what we will call a routed face. So this will be an aluminum face, and a router will go in here and cut out these areas. So, and then it'll be backed up with an LED type of plastic that diffuses light and lets the light come through nice and even. So then you'll see in these areas here, wherever there's white, that's where the light will shine through. So it won't be just a bunch of white light. And then also there's graphics, as you can see in that picture. This is a coffee stain here, this great logo. Tammy Jarvis's mom designed this. And so that is all that stuff will be, it'll have graphics on top of it that diffuse the light and calm it down a little bit. Any questions on that part?
And then is the light, so the actual logo sign is facing north and south, is that correct? So it's not like it's, the Ad Astra is with the storefront, correct?
Yeah.
Right, it's
Okay.
a projecting sign, so you'll be able to see
your
it walking or
lights-
driving.
Okay.
Right. And all the lighting will be inside. It'll be LED lit, and right now we are planning on using Sloan LED prismatic LEDs, which will go around the inside, and they'll basically shine light from the perimeter of the sign can into the face. The problem right now with like so many materials is what's available. So, but we think that's what we're going to use. There's a product very similar to that. Oh, and then the attachment method was the other thing.
Well, before you move on, can I ask staff, does that meet the design review?
So if
guide-
we're
or design
viewing this
guidelines?
at night, the areas where the light will shine through is the cutouts for the letters?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're not talking about a glowing, entirely illuminated cabinet. We're talking about illuminated letters, so that is consistent with
Okay.
the guidelines and with other signs that we have seen downtown.
Okay, that's what I thought I was hearing, but wanted to verify. Okay, thank you.
And then we also had the question about the exact method of attachment to the upper balcony.
Right,
So the sign will have an internal framework that has mounts that go up, and there will be a saddle mount that goes up. This is the existing beam right here, and that, I believe, is a 4 by 10 inch by 1/4 inch wall beam. And then these will be through bolts that go through both sides of that in double shear, and there'll be eight attachment points.
So that's one of the beams that supports the balcony?
Yep.
Okay.
okay,
So that should be quite secure.
Yeah, the approximate weight of the sign, since it's all aluminum, right now, the way we designed it is about 48 pounds. It depends on what we have to use for a power supply inside, and that might change by 2 or 3 pounds, but
yeah, it's really light.
everything nowadays is pretty light.
Okay. Any further questions?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Hearing none, if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion on 3.4.
We asked for a public question.
Oh, public questions, I'm so sorry. I got it every time except that one. Do we have any? I know.
anyone there.
Is there anyone there? Or any other questions from staff? No? Okay. Hearing none. A
All right,
motion.
then I move we approve it with under option 2, and that if there's any significant changes to the design or materials approved by the design review board, they'll be presented to the board's administrative staff to determine whether additional review is required.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, I don't see any administrative items or discussion items. So moving on to number 4, unfinished or other business.
So, since you had worked through and taken action on the Arts Center project, we have no items scheduled, and there will be no need for a December 22nd meeting, so we'll give you that time off.
Woohoo.
Then we're working on our schedules and calendars for 2023, and we'll keep you informed about whether there will be a meeting the second week of January. But I would apologize for not recognizing or giving you every single item relating to the facade on the lofts building, knowing what was photographed and what was architectural rendering, and just for the board's benefit, it's more about just staff keeping things straight. But there are the Lee Lofts have 2 applications going to the Salina Board of Zoning Appeals. They have 2 applications going to the Salina Heritage Commission. They have 2 applications going to the Downtown Design Review Board, and so we're trying to keep straight, making sure which attachments go for which board. And so I believe that the attachments that you were looking for were all attached to the packet intended for the Heritage Commission, but we were trying to not be redundant, but we didn't get everything covered there. We fortunately did have them available to display on the screen, but there's lots of movement going on with the Lee Lofts and lots of different boards reviewing, so we did our best, and hopefully having them on the screen was helpful. We also appreciate the help we got from Tyler. We've had, as other places have, a lot of illness going through the development services staff, so we've had a lot of people absent, and so we're trying to keep everything going, and getting help from people like Tyler is extremely helpful to us and to the work of the board. So.
Okay, great. Do we have anyone from the public?
We do not have anyone from the public on Zoom currently or in the room.
Okay, so that being said, I would take a motion to adjourn.
I will motion for adjournment.
I will second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting adjourned.